Well, hey everybody, I'm here with Stacy Schaffer, and we're going to have a conversation today about human trafficking, which is something that has been on our radar as a church and on our hearts, but we've not been as proactive about until this year. It's even one of the areas where we thought we had plans for 2020, and many of those plans didn't happen, but this is something that God brought to our attention, and we're excited about what Evangel's been able to do and even what we'll be able to do in the future. So, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And I wonder if you could define for everybody even what human trafficking is. I know you hear sex trafficking, labor trafficking, human trafficking, and what is human trafficking?
So human trafficking is essentially defined as modern day slavery. So when you think about slavery, some people go back to the transatlantic slave trade. So basically slavery's just evolved and it looks different to today. So two categories where human trafficking can be broken down into are sex trafficking and labor trafficking. And basically what we're seeing is someone is essentially selling another person for a good or a service.
So I know you started something called Project 31.8 out of, obviously human trafficking came into your radar somehow and you have a passion to help with it. Now, how did that kind of unfold? How did it come to your attention?
For sure. So I had always been someone who was passionate about human rights, specifically looking at slavery. So in 2006, I was a student at the University of Mary, and for extra credit, they said, hey, why don't you go hear this speaker? And I was that student who was all about extra credit. So I went there, and the speaker was talking about something called human trafficking. I was immediately hooked, and I just felt this calling that I needed to do something. So that day I called my parents and I said, is it okay if I quit my job and volunteer? And of course, right away, they, I think, thought I was maybe going through a midlife crisis, right? But they did support me volunteering with an organization who was working on human trafficking. So that took me to Guatemala. And while in Guatemala, I dealt with my first case of human trafficking, which was an 8-year-old girl named Anna, who was trafficked from El Salvador to a brothel in Guatemala. And while at that brothel, she was repeatedly sexually assaulted over and over again. Now, regardless of your age or who you are, that's going to be very traumatic. But fortunately for Anna, the organization I was working with, we were able to intervene, rescue her, and put her through rehabilitation. And today she lives a relatively normal life. She has a family, she has kids, and she's doing really well, considering what she's been through. But a lot of people saw Anna's story as a story of tragedy, but I always saw it as a story of success because she survived to share it. So it's really Anna's motivation that gave me the inspiration to start 31.8 Project, which comes from Proverbs 31.8, speak up for those who can't speak for themselves.
So I know you talked about Guatemala, and when I talk to people about human trafficking, I think they always think about it as something in another country or far away. But I know 31.8 Project works locally. And so what's going on in North Dakota with this issue? Is it here? Is it present?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of myths associated with human trafficking within our state. And the reality is it's happening here in Bismarck as well as our rural communities too. So as a task force, we have served over 482 survivors of human trafficking.
In North Dakota?
In North Dakota in that number, 80% of them were North Dakota residents.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think there's really this thought that there's people coming from other countries that are being trafficked. And that does happen through labor trafficking. We definitely see that, and even sex trafficking. But a majority of it is actual residents here in North Dakota.
So what does it look like? I mean, maybe people say, how can this be happening around me and I don't even see it, or I don't even know what's going on? Is it just in the dark alley where nobody sees it, or is it out in front of people?
Right. Human trafficking is definitely a hidden crime, but once you start to learn the signs, it becomes more evident that it's around us much more than we think. So when it comes to sex trafficking, when we think of youth, we see a lot of homeless and runaway children that are trafficked. We also see familial trafficking, where it's an actual family member that is selling their child, and sometimes it's for drugs, and sometimes it's literally to make ends meet. So we've seen both of those things happen. Labor trafficking, a lot of times it's people that are coming into the state in different visa programs. So they're actually coming here legally, and once they get here, they're put into trafficking situations. So some of the industries that we see this occurring, for sex trafficking, online is the number one way people are recruited and sold. For labor trafficking, I grew up on a farm, so I'm very familiar with what it takes to be a farmer, but we also see trafficking occurring within the agricultural industry, construction, even restaurants and hotels.
So I know you work with the state task force and also the 31-8 project.
Yep.
And what are you guys doing, or what have you, all the people that you've talked about that are affected, what have you been able to do to help them or to rescue them out of trafficking?
Yeah, so it really takes a multidisciplinary team to do this. So we have law enforcement that help, we have service providers, counseling services. All of those things need to be available in order to really help victims of human trafficking. So on average, they need 12 to 14 different services. So sometimes it's essential housing, clothing, getting jobs. Some of our survivors have children at a really young age, so who helps them there? Those are all things that we have to partner on in order to really be effective in the work we do.
So give me the numbers again about, I just really want to hit the point that it's relevant and it's happening here. Any numbers or any thoughts that would help people just understand that this is going on around them?
Yep. So since January 1st, 2016, we've served 482 victims. And again, that's 80% of those individuals are residents of North Dakota. So it's important to see that too. From an international standpoint, we do estimate that there's around 40 million people enslaved in the world today, which is more than at the height of the transatlantic slave trade. Also, it's important to note that this is a $150 billion industry. So it's not small. The reason this continues to exist is because of supply and demand. So if you wouldn't have people that are willing to purchase other people, you wouldn't have human trafficking. But as long as the demand increases, you're always going to have more supply.
So what should people watch for?
So there's lots of different signs to look for. It's important for people to keep in mind that a person might only exhibit one sign. They might exhibit multiple signs. And some of those things can be eye contact. So culturally, sometimes it's seen as rude to look someone in the eyes. But in human trafficking, we do see that occurring, and it's a way to create ownership over someone. So you're not allowed to look someone in the eye. A lot of times, some of our victims will have bruises that are in varying stages of healing. If they're youth, they might have been a great student, and all of a sudden they're hardly showing up for school. When they do, they seem anxious, depressed. We have a lot of students that have started to date someone much older. And what I mean by that, you might have a 14-year-old that's dating someone in their older 20s. And then we start to see signs where they were this friendly, happy kid and now they're not. Those are just a few red flags that people can look for. But the main thing is, if in your gut it feels like something's wrong, it probably is. So if you're in a store and you notice two people and the interaction seems uncomfortable, there's probably something going on there. Not saying it's always trafficking, but that should give us enough sense that we should report that. And some things too that will help you or help us when we're investigating cases. So let's say you are in a store and you notice these two individuals. Write down all the descriptions of these two individuals. So if they have a certain tattoo or a certain tattoo or a birthmark, that can help us. If you see them go into a certain color vehicle or type of vehicle and write down their license plate, those are all things that will help us when you report a case of human trafficking.
So how do they do that? I mean, if you see something, what do you do about it?
Yes, so there's a few different things you can do. If it's an emergency, always call 911. If you don't think it's an emergency, we encourage you to first call local law enforcement. If you're uncomfortable calling local law enforcement, we do have a tip line in North Dakota. If you don't want to access the tip line, there's also a human trafficking hotline as well.
Okay.
So those are 4 different ways that you could report a tip.
And what else can people do? I mean, we had the Freedom Walk,
Yes.
Which was a huge success just in educating people, and helping them know what to do. But what else
Yeah.
can people do to help?
Yeah. So just being aware. as soon as you know the information, share it with other people, and don't go with the theory it doesn't exist here, because it absolutely does. And the other thing to mention is 50% of people are actually trafficked by people they know. So a lot of times it is a family member, it's a relative or someone close to them. So just because you know someone doesn't mean you really know them. So be careful who your kids hang out with. Make sure that you've asked the other parents questions, you know what they do for work, or just more of what their living situation is can be important. If you're part of a book club, read a book on human trafficking.
Yeah.
Host a viewing of a certain documentary on human trafficking. That spreading education piece is really huge when it comes to combating human trafficking.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank our church for partnering, and everybody else who maybe watches online. Maybe you don't even come to Evangel, for partnering, with the Freedom Walk. It's emotional for me, because I think I've learned so much in the last couple weeks that I thought this was just something that we sent teams to other parts of the world, and then to hear the statistics that you're talking about. And even at Evangel, we work with high-risk youth, and just thinking about the higher risk that they're actually maybe exposed to than we even know.
Yeah.
And so thank you for everything you're doing.
Yes, and thank you guys. And something I do want to share is that Freedom Walk might have seemed like something minor, but in the scope of this, it's huge. Because if you were able to attend that day and just take in the knowledge on human trafficking, now you're able to share that with other people. So that is huge when it comes to this. And we just really appreciate the opportunity to be involved in that event.
Yeah, well, we want to help out in a greater way. And many of you know there was a matching gift that was given that allowed us to be able to present 31-8 Project with some funds going forward. So it's my privilege on behalf of Evangel to give you a check for $50,000 today from our church family in support of what 31-8 Project is doing. So there you go. Thank you for everything that you guys are doing. I have a real check for you too to take home today. And man, we just pray that God gives you guys boldness and wisdom on how to overcome this other epidemic, that's happening in our society right now.
Yeah. I'm speechless. Thank you guys so much. We've been doing this for a long time.
It's okay.
And we're really grateful. Sorry.
It's okay. It obviously makes a huge impact for you guys, and I think that's important for us to understand.
Yes.
Because you see it, you feel it, and you know that it matters.
Yes. Yes. It really means a lot, and we're just very, very grateful. And for the people we work with and the survivors out there too, this makes a huge difference for them, and especially the past couple of months for some of the survivors we've worked with, it's been challenging. So just know how big of a difference that's going to make for them is just amazing. So thank you so much.
And I hope the partnership exists long into the future as well.
Yes, we do too. So thank you.
Thank you guys for what you're doing.
Yeah. Thank you.